tell me you've done this before. You've been scrolling through whichever audiobook service you use to pick your next read, you select it, download, and start to listen, and you realize there's just something about it you can't get with. Either the narrator is off, the pacing doesn't feel right, or it's just not working in the audiobook format at all. We all know audiobooks can get expensive, like real expensive. And if you're someone who uses credits to get your audiobooks like me, making the wrong decision on an audiobook feels like a complete waste. So in this video, my aim is to help you tell if you'll enjoy an audiobook or not with a few tips and strategies because, well, I've gotten a little better at it. Let's take for a second probably the number one complaint most people have about regretting their audiobook purchase, the narrator. Honestly, this is such a personal preference. Sometimes a narrator that someone else loves just doesn't work for you. It might be their accent, their tone of voice, how they deliver the lines, or specific speech patterns that make it hard to focus. Whatever it is, it can't be helped. And while we are going to address that in this video, there are a whole host of additional things to look out for when picking an audiobook. Now don't leave. You're probably thinking you don't want a whole list of things to look out for every time you pick up an audiobook. You just want to pick it and get to reading. And I get it. Honestly, I do. But these things, once I've said them, will just sit in the back of your mind as little clues to look out for when looking at an audiobook page. Trust me. Okay, the first thing we're going to look for is whether the book itself is complicated in any way. This could mean lots of characters, lots of different character points of view, characters with names you might not be used to, place names you might not be used to, etc. If the audiobook is, for example, an epic fantasy with lots of world building, this might require quite a bit of focus, at least to start with, especially while you grasp onto names and places. This is kind of why physical books have maps and character lists so that you can refer back to them as you read. I can't count the number of times I have needed to look at the character list for my current read, Song of the Huntress. With an audiobook, you just don't have that. This isn't to say that you shouldn't do an audiobook for this type of book, just be aware that it might require a certain level of focusing power to do it. And if you can't focus on the book, then you won't enjoy it as much because you're not actually taking in the story. As an alternative, a lighter book with slightly less world building or more straightforward topics might work a little better if you struggle with audiobook focus. If you don't though, you're probably good. Okay, next, and this one is on the audiobook page on whichever service you use, take a look at how many narrators it has. If your book of choice has multiple character points of view, it's worth seeing if there are different narrators for these points of view or not. If there's one author for the whole book, it's worth thinking about whether you think the narrator in question can pull off different character voices or points of view within the book, if there are any. You'll be able to test this out by listening to a sample, but I will talk about that in a minute because I have some specific tips for that. The next thing to think about is if you recognize any of the narrators. Some well-known books have famous narrators or actors narrating them. I'm reading The Odyssey at the moment and Sir Ian McKellen is narrating it, so I kind of knew I was going to enjoy it because I'm going to be honest, I really like him. It's also worth double checking if you recognize the narrator from a previous book you might have listened to. Narrators frequently narrate books within a specific genre, so you might see someone you already know from a previous book. For example, I absolutely love the audiobook for The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, so I have a pretty good idea that I'll like the other audiobooks Lamise Isaac in particular narrated. Next, keep an eye out for dramatized or full cast versions of audiobooks. These are usually audiobooks that aren't narrated by a single author, instead each character has a narrator. They'll also include cinematic music and sound effects. They can be pretty special to listen to and are worth giving a go if you've never tried. A good example of this is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was put together as a BBC Radio 4 series. Okay, so let's say you've looked at all of these things and you're thinking a particular audiobook might be a good option. Let's just make sure by listening to a sample. Pretty much every place that you can get audiobooks will allow you to listen to a sample before buying or reserving it. This includes things like Libby or BorrowBox. Listening to a sample will, of course, help you to see if you'll actually enjoy listening to a book by a particular narrator or set of narrators, but here are a few specific things to look out for. While listening, see if you actually like the narrator. Listen to their tone of voice, how they deliver lines, etc. You'll probably get a feeling pretty quick if you like listening to them or not. Keep in mind if you get to hear all the narrators in the sample or not. A lot of the time the sample is of the first few paragraphs in the book, so you may not get a chance to. If you can't and you really want to make sure, I recommend clicking on the second narrator's name, find another audiobook they've narrated, and listen to a sample of that. It should give you a rough idea. Beyond this, and this is something most book platforms don't allow you to do yet, I would love to be able to filter reviews by the format people read the book in. So if I really wanted to know whether people enjoyed the audiobook version of Automatic Noodle, I'd have to scroll through the reviews and hope they mention the format they read it in. On the story graph, you can see a link that says against another edition that when you click it shows which edition they read, but it does take a lot of manual work to find them all. The story graph in particular is working on better review filters right now, which includes format. So as soon as that's done, it might be worth checking these before purchasing as well. Although honestly, it could be overkill. Now, if you're an audiobook fan, you might have some additional tips you might want to share in the comments, so please do. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.